Hello and welcome back to my channel, Bookish Lady Night, where we get a look behind the book. Today I'm joined by the amazing K.W. Foster. She is the author of A Curse of Breath and Blood, and it's book 1 in the Mind Breaker series. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited. I recently finished this book and it was just amazing. I loved everything about it. It like the world building, it hooks you in. There's mystery. You don't quite know what's going on. It just has all the things that you need in a fantasy book.
Thank you so much.
Of course. So, what was your inspiration for writing this book? Did something happen or you just kind of came to you?
It's slightly based on my life, but also kind of like stuff that I didn't see in other books, and I wanted to be represented in the fantasy genre.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So do you feel energized when you're writing or do you feel tired?
It depends. When I'm doing the like initial draft, so it took me probably a little over a year to write the book. I started in September of 2022. And I actually started with a completely different book. I started with what would be considered the prequel, and I do eventually want to go back and rewrite that. But so I started with that, and then I ended up doing two drafts of that, and then oh, I don't know if you hear that sirens going off in my
No, it's all right.
backyard.
No, a little bit, but yeah, not too bad.
um, of course, it had to happen when I was quiet all day. Um, so I wrote a few drafts of that, and then I kind of put it to the side, and I was like, okay, this isn't working. I want to try something else. And I wrote this book, which is a kind of a continuation of that, and that's the one that I kind of felt more energy towards.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote. I think I wrote this book, the first draft, in like January of 2023, and then I subsequently wrote another 9 drafts of it after I edited it, got beta readers, and then got their feedback. But like all the while, I'm like doing little edits so that I can see where the story's going and what needs to be fixed and all this
Yeah.
stuff. Um, yeah, and so then in like June of last year, I started querying it out to agents, and I got some good feedback, but ultimately I ended up going with a smaller publisher who could get my book out quicker, and I think it fits the indie market a little better. Um, and so I think that was the right choice for this book and me.
That's great. So what did you feel like during your writing process that was like your writing kryptonite?
Um, I think that like eventually you get to the point where you can't see the forest through the trees and it just kind of all looks the same. You're like, I don't know if this is great or this if this is terrible. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that was the hardest part. And then like but you have to have like good critique partners who can help you with that. Um who can help you with that part of the process, or else you just get lost and you could like edit forever. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the most tiring part, and then going through um their edits, which is what I'm doing right now with the second book, is very tiring to me because it's like, oh, I totally forgot about that. Oh my gosh, there's a plot hole. Now I got to fix this and go back do put weave something through all these different chapters. So it's just a lot of work. That's a lot of
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. It's a lot of like mind mapping, I would think, like
Yeah,
filling it all in.
yeah.
So did you like experience writer's block or is it just you were writing and then you had this offshoot and you're like, I want to focus on this part with between the first book and the prequel? Was that
It
like
was
a
kind of
writer's block?
like, yeah, it was kind of like there was like a writer's block, and I was like, I know where I want this story to go, um, but I didn't know like how to get it there, and it was just like the prequel was becoming so long, I couldn't. I had to when you query a book, you have to keep it like under 100,000. I could not keep it anywhere in that domain, and so I was like, well, I'm just going to write this next book, and like it can be the first in the series if it gets picked up, and so that's what ended up happening. So event and now I have the freedom to write as much as I want. So I can go back and make that book better and make it as long as I want or as long as it needs to be.
Yeah.
So I think that worked out the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, with the way it was meant to.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really exciting. I would like to read the prequel. I love that. I love when they have that. And then I love like extended epilogues or like where you like down the road you put like them 10 years later and this is what's going on. I love that kind of stuff. So if you could go back in time, like from now to when like back to where you were where you started, and tell your younger writing self something, what would be something that you'd go back and like give advice for or any kind of words you'd give yourself?
I think that like when you're a young writer, it's harder for you to take criticism, and I feel like if you get a lot of beta readers, they'll say like some things are like you feel like, oh no, that's like way off base. But I think like every critique has merit because like those are your readers, and so like taking a step back and then looking at your critiques is helpful because you have to kind of like put yourself in the mind of a reader. Like even if you don't agree with it, other readers might think the same thing. So I think like every critique has some sort of validation. It's just sorting through which ones have the most validation.
Advice. Yeah, that would be probably a vulnerable state to be in, right? Because you're reading what they're thinking about what you've written and having to take it without taking it personally to make the story better. That would be hard.
Yeah. And now as a more seasoned writer, I'm like, I go to my critique partner and I'm like, please tear this up. I need help here. Like, this is what I can't see what I'm missing here. And now now that's one of my more favorite parts of the process because I can take that criticism. My skin is thicker and, turn it into something. It's only going to make my writing better.
Yeah. Well, that's really great. That's a good thing to be aware of as you progress in your craft. So since you have a fantasy book, I always ask my fantasy writers this: if you could be any mythical creature, mythical being, what would it be and why?
Oh, I think either like a wizard or like a unicorn.
Unicorn? Yeah. I'd probably be the wizard too. I don't know. It depends on the day, but I've always had an affinity for King Arthur and Merlin, so that probably would be where I would go with for sure. So what do you like about it? Do you like the magic that you can cast magic or?
Yeah, I like, but also like kind of, I don't know, the wizard I'm thinking of is like kind of like looks more human, so like people don't know, and you can kind of fly under the radar.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. What do you feel like the most difficult thing is about writing for you?
I am not like a planner. I kind of like, I'm not someone who makes like these huge outlines. I kind of like see the beginning, middle, and end. And the hardest part is like, how do I get to that end and like putting that together. And then also I work a full-time job during the day. So finding time at night to write is very difficult, and I'm pregnant. So that's another layer of exhaustion on me.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Yeah, it's making time for my life and the writing that's like the hardest part. And like there are days I'm like, I have no creativity left in me. I'm just running on fumes here.
So you're more of a pantser than a plotter.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you feel like the most difficult part was for you for writing the opposite sex?
This is gonna sound stupid, but I think the most difficult part is like I know as a woman what makes me aroused and how I feel, but I'm not a man. I don't know what they feel, so I kind of just had to guess and get in like a man's head. And like read other books and see how they did it. That was the hardest part. And then since I have two love interests, trying to make them not sound the same, which is probably
Yeah.
the reason why I did her point of view in first person and theirs in third, because A, it's her story, but also it was easier for me to like make them be different characters that way.
Yeah. When I first started reading it, I was like, wait a minute. And then I had to stop and think, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Because I haven't really seen that too much before, where there's like you said, the first person, and then there's like these other like views of it. But it like opened up so much more around. I was like, this is really interesting. I like this. I haven't seen that very much before. So, was it hard having their voices come forward to like make them that differentiation?
Yes, I really had to like so in the prequel I don't have Theron in that book. I
Yeah.
only have Caden. So he has been with me since the beginning, so it was a lot easier to do him because like I already knew them. I knew those characters more than I knew some of the other ones. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think like that made it a little bit easier actually because like I had been plotting with Alia and Caden for a year or 6 months before I wrote this book.
Yeah.
So I felt like I already kind of knew them and I knew how I wanted them to be. Whereas like with Aaron, he was like he kind of just popped in my head one day, and so I had to kind of get to know him on the fly.
Yeah. Did you do any kind of like character like profile or like an interview with them to just get them more
um,
solidified?
no, they kind of came to me like fully formed.
Uh-huh.
I was like, this is how this character is.
Yeah. So I've heard some writers tell me that some of them are like you said, where they have the character and they slowly start to reveal themselves. Other people are like they came in and they were really bossy and I had this idea for the story, but then they took it another way. Do you feel like your characters did that?
Um, in the second book, definitely.
Yeah.
There was a time when I was writing in the second book, and I was just like, oh boy, how are they going to get out of this? And I was like, oh, I'm the writer. I got to write this. I got to get out of this. How are they going to get out of this? So yeah, sometimes I feel like, especially with Alias, she takes me in a lot of different places, and I'm like, okay, well now we're here and we have to do this. So yeah,
So what was your hardest type of scene to write in this?
I think it's not necessarily a scene, it's like getting the emotions correct because I
Mhm.
don't want it to feel cold. I want it to feel like fully formed and like trying to like put myself in the character's position and like how are they feeling during this moment. I think
Yeah.
that's the hardest part for me is to like go super hard on the emotion. Um and that's something that my critique partner helps me with a lot is like there needs to be more emotion here, what are they feeling, because I'm just like trying to write it, get it out of my brain as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
So I think that's the hardest part for me is like going back and be like, okay, what are they feeling here, how are they going to react if this happens to this character. That kind of stuff is
Okay.
what takes the longest.
Do you feel like one of the characters were more emotional than the other and you had to like add it back into that other character, or was it just as overall?
It just adds overall just, oh, they would probably feel something here, or like this part's missing emotion, so I have to like go back and then like figure out what they're
Fill that
doing.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the counter side of that, what was your most favorite either part of the process or favorite scene to write?
My favorite scene is when she's I don't want to spoiler, but when Alia's like going into the camp,
Okay.
when yeah,
Yeah.
that was my favorite scene.
Okay.
That was so fun to write. And there's not a similar one, but there's another one in book two that was really fun for me to write, and so I'm really excited for everyone to read that.
So within the writing, is your favorite type like doing like the conversation or the banter part of it, or like the action, the romance? Like what's your
I think I
favorite?
would definitely say that the action is my favorite part,
Mhm.
because it's just like so fun to like see your characters do stuff, and
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
like if you've been building up to it for like a long time. You're like, oh my gosh, this is gonna pay off. This will be perfect. And so yeah, I definitely think like that's the funnest part for me.
Yeah. That's really great. So did you always want to be a writer?
I've always like written. I write a lot for my day job, but I write a lot of boring stuff for my day job. Um, I'm also like a published researcher, so I would do a lot of that.
Hmm.
But I started a book in like 2017, 2018, like a thriller, and I never finished that. And then something just kind of came over me in 2022. I was working completely remote. Um, I I just had a lot of time on my hands, and like I think I had too much time on my hands, and so my brain like would not shut off. And so that's when I started writing this.
Yeah. So that other book, do you think you'll go back and finish it or?
Maybe someday, but I'm focused on this right now, and I've got a
Yeah.
couple others that I'd like to eventually write.
Hmm.
So I think like this trajectory right now is good, and maybe in maybe in 10 years, I'll come back to the
Come back
thriller.
to it. So for this next phase, are you in like, are we looking at next year or the year after that we'll get to see the characters again
You will get to see them next year. I'm turning
next
it
year?
in hopefully in early November to my publisher, and they'll just put me on because it's a sequel. We don't need as much lead up time, so hopefully they'll put me on for sometime mid next year. Hopefully,
Nice. I'm
don't
looking
go on
forward to it. How many books do you plan for this series
that.
so far?
Right now, at least four, maybe five.
Wonderful. Ooh, I'm excited. I love when there's a lot of books so you can stay in the world longer.
Yeah,
I love the I don't know if you probably a lot of people have seen them on Instagram where the girl's like reading the book and then she either falls forward or she falls backwards and then it's like she's in that world and I'm like, how do they do that?
I
But I
know.
want to do
I know. I wish I was that talented with
I
with
know.
the
But in real
Instagram.
life, like we could just open the book and then just do that and then we're there and just experiencing it all around us. That would be so great.
Yeah.
I love books like that. So out of your characters, since you have two male interests in the book, which one's your favorite?
I don't think I can choose to be honest. I've been with Caden for a long time, and so like I understand him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas readers have not been with him for 2.5 years. So it's hard to tell because like Theron, he just kind of came to me and I wrote him. Um, I was just like the way he came to me is like that scene when he's like leaning on the balcony. That's the way that he came to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I have kind of an affinity for him that way. It's just like because he just like popped in my head like fully formed, and I was like, oh, this is going to be the character that everybody is swooning over, and it's
Yeah.
worked out that way so far. But you know, I know where the story is going, and so I don't want to ruin it. But yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, you kind of left us on a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end where you're not
yeah.
quite sure. So I'll be excited to see more from them. So which of the characters is most like you and why?
I guess the character that's most like me is Alia because I based some of my own life off of I based some of her life off of my life. So
Mm-hmm.
I say we're probably the most similar.
So what's your favorite tropes that you like to either read or write, obviously, into your story?
Um, well, I wrote Second Chance Romance, and I do really enjoy that. And I'm trying to think. I really like a sweet MC. I don't think that they get enough love on the internet. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
everybody loves enemies to lovers, but like there's something very nice about like a male character who like just loves the female character so much, and I think that's like so rare nowadays
Yeah.
that it's like something special that should be treasured.
Yeah, there's a lot of which I like, but there's a lot of like the morally gray, they hate each other and then all the stuff kind of happens and then they, get to the point where they are the other way, but it's there's a lot of it. So yeah, that definitely is not very many characters lately where there's not necessarily like because there is a little bit of the toxicity here because of their past, but like it's just not this like, oh, I hate you and you drive me crazy, and it's just like, well, we had this history and we're working through it.
Yeah.
But I still love you. Like I liked that.
Yeah.
I liked that. So when you started the book, you said you kind of knew the beginning, middle, and end. So when you added in the little twists and turns, did you have those, or did those kind of come to you as you were writing the story?
Those came to me. Well, I should credit my critique partner who really helped me with the big twist. She's suggested it and I took it.
And you ran with it.
I think that's like the beauty of having someone that you can like bounce ideas off of. And then the rest kind of come to me as I'm writing. And then again, when I'm editing, I'm like, oh, what if this happened instead? And I think it takes a lot of like me putting the characters in different situations to figure out which one is going to work best for the story.
Great. So when you're writing your process, do you go back and forth like as you're going, or do you wait till you have a first draft and then let them read it and critique it and then go back?
It depends. Most of the time I fully write it out. I'm just write it all out. It's not pretty, but I know that I can fix it. This time I got kind of stuck at like 75,000 words. And so then I gave it to them and I was like, I'm really stuck here. Please help me.
Yeah.
And just kind of taking a step back from the project is also helpful. So like once I get done with the first draft, I let it sit for like 2 or 3 weeks. So I can just like forget about it. So I can look at it with like fresh eyes. Because if I look at it right away, I'm already been in that situation. Yeah. So I think like giving it room to breathe, and also like if you need help, asking for it, is what works best for me.
That's what, yeah. My notes are over here. Sorry if I keep like looking over here. I have 2 screens, and so I have my little questions that I make sure I want to ask. So within writing, who was your favorite of your characters that you spent like when you were writing them? Like which one did you really like writing the most?
I really liked writing Lucius. He's
Yeah?
my favorite character to write. Yeah. He's just like snarky and like nobody really knows what his deal is, and he'll have, he like hates Ailey at the beginning, and then they kind of like make amends. And they're gonna have like a lot of beta readers like, oh, I thought he was the love interest, and I was like, no. And I think there's something to be said about hating someone and then like eventually becoming friends.
Yeah.
So they have a good character. They have a good relationship arc.
Yes.
And that will continue into the second book. And eventually, he'll have his own story arc. But yeah, he's my favorite to write.
I really liked it was really cool how you did it, because like a lot of the time they'll be like, because he's the spy, so it'll be like they're just really good at sneaking around, but you like went up to a whole other level with his character, and I loved it. And it was such a unique way to do it, because most of the time they're like, oh, they have shadow magic, and so they just disappear into the shadows, but like you went a whole other, and I don't want to give anything away, but it was so good. I loved that. I was like, this is so cool, because like I could see it. It was like playing as like a movie in my mind as I was reading it, especially in the scene, I can't remember her name, the queen,
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
the wild queen. Yeah. That whole scene where you like describe what he's doing. And I'm like, so I really liked that. I'm excited to see more of him. That is for sure. So with your time, like, do you end on a day for a word count, or do you try to get a certain scene or a certain amount of chapters? Like when you said you try to get your writing balance with your daily life.
I try to get a chapter done a day. Does that always happen? No. But I try to get a chapter a day. And then, like, if I don't get a chapter a day, I kind of, like, make notes of, like, what needs to happen at the end of where I leave off. But I try to do a chapter a day. If I'm really working, if I'm really going, I can get 2, which I'm really happy about. But, yeah, I try to do a chapter a day.
Nice. So now after being published author and you're doing the second book, is there anything that you have really learned during this journey that you're changing up for like this next book, as far as like the way you do things or your timeline or how you're approaching it?
As far as like my writing goes, I was like very strict about my writing last time. I was like, oh, we can't use. I was very like by the book of like the English teacher's guide to like writing, and now I've very much kind of like let that go and kind of let the story unfold in the way that it needs to. So like I would go in and like edit out all these words and like they're like don't use this word and don't people overuse like the word was or whatever, and now I've gone in and like kind of just let that go out the window and kind of like let it flow the way it needs to.
Oh, you
So
mean like when you overuse a word, you're like change the word to something else. You're not worrying like necessarily about that as much
yes,
as you were before.
yeah, like filler words. I was like so concerned with those. I was like, oh, this is got to be like technically correct. And I think I've let that go a little bit and just kind of let the story, let my writing kind of like flow in a more natural way instead of being like,
Mhm.
oh, this is a textbook
Yeah,
way to write. And I think that has made my writing better.
it's really interesting. That's cool. Um, so with this new book and that book, so you said it takes about a year. Is that kind of your trajectory? You think again it'll be about a year worth of writing to get this one done, or is it a little
This
less?
one has been, I started writing it in April. I finished it in August. I let it sit and now I'm working through and then I gave it to my critique partner and now I'm working through those edits. So it should be done in sometime in November. So it's shortened a little bit, like 8 months instead of
Yeah,
12.
yeah. That's really great. I'm so excited. Like I cannot wait. So did you enjoy the process? I love that like you have a lot of character art that you've had out there. Did you enjoy the process of like working with artists to come up with the character art and then your cover?
Yeah, so I really like working with the artists. I'm like so happy that I can support them. And I always try to make sure that they know like they still have like artistic freedom. It's like this is what I like, but in your style. And I try to give them as much artistic freedom as I can. Um, and then my cover was just kind of, I wish I had a better story about my cover. My publisher was like, hey, this is a website that we use. And it was a pre made cover that
Yeah,
I picked out.
yeah. I like
So,
it. I think it's really pretty.
oh, good.
It's really pretty. I love it. I like the cover a lot. It's
Oh,
really I
thank
like
you.
the design of it and then with the way that the words are on it. I thought it was a beautiful cover.
Oh, great. Yeah, my publisher did a little bit of like editing on it, but mostly just that's the way it
That's
was.
what it was, yeah. So in your opinion as an author, what do you think makes a great story?
I think I've thought about this a lot, and I think like you can have a really good story, but if your characters aren't relatable and compelling, that's when the problems start. I think
Yeah,
you have to have good characters to build off of, or else you're not going to have a good story.
yeah, that's awesome. So what is the most surprising thing you've learned on your writing journey, or as just an author, or just the whole gambit of it?
How random everything is, to be honest. Randomly getting picked up to be published, what books go viral, and how there's no way you can control that at all.
Mhm.
All you can do is like write the next book and
Yeah,
then hope that that one goes
yeah,
viral also. Um, yeah, there's stuff that you can do, but most of it is just absolutely random, like the right person picking up your book at the right time, and then they tell other people about it, and then they tell other people about it, and yeah, you can
yeah,
have a unique you can have a great like some books are some of my most favorite books are not popular and I'm like why aren't they popular because they're amazing.
yeah.
And you can't control that at all and you kind of just have to just keep writing the next book.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite books or authors that you've liked even as like a child? Did you have any books that have really stuck with you?
Well, yes. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I read a lot of YA books. So I still think about this book series. It was about like these teenage boys who like are really rich and they live in New York. It's called The Insiders. I loved that book series. It was like, oh, so wild. Like I lived in a small town in the middle of nowhere, so it was like really exotic for me.
Yeah.
I think about that, and then obviously I read all the Harry Potter books. Um, and now as an adult, I read all over. I don't just read fantasy. In fact, when I'm writing, I don't read any fantasy at all, because I'm influenced by what I read. So I try to stay away from that. But I love like Kristen Hanna. Any of her books I absolutely love. Auto buy for me. I read a lot of historical fiction, Outlander. I read all those books, and then I love a good thriller. And I'm not picky. I'll just pick up whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's really great. I also love I love a very good thriller. I like when do you like when it's just a thriller or do you like the romantic thrillers? Or both?
I think it depends. It's just like, yeah, if the story's good, I'll pick it up. I don't
Yeah.
care.
Do you get your characters' personalities and like their traits? Do you pick up from people around you, or do you just totally make them all up within yourself?
Mostly I just kind of make them up.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So with going forward, are you planning on doing kind of featuring each of the side characters, or will it still be the main
The next book
storyline?
will be the three again. They're going to have more. The men will have more parts.
Mhm.
Um, it'll be almost equal, but Ailey will still have like the majority of it. But they'll both have
Yeah,
a lot. And then the book after that, the side characters will start to get their own POVs, and it kind of expand into that.
nice. So how do you feel with your writing? Because you were saying like for Alia that a lot of it is coming from your own, your own person. Do you feel like a lot of yourself coming out in that book was like kind of cathartic or like a releasing of stuff because you're putting it out in your book?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like that was just like a release for me. That's
Yeah,
part of the reason I wrote it, is because I really needed a release,
you
and
needed
this is
it.
a way for me to release it.
Yeah. So with that being like kind of the background premise with your story, do you read the reviews people post or do you stay away from them and have someone else read them and only pass them on if it's like a need to know?
I don't really read them at all. I kind of just look at how many there are, because that's an indicator of how many people are reading it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't really read reviews. Sometimes if I'm tagged in like a nice review, it's nice to read it, but
Yeah.
for the most part, I don't read them at all.
Yeah. Stay away from them. Yeah, I've heard mixed things about reviews. I think I would get scared. I would get scared. So what do you feel like is your favorite part about being the writer? Is it writing or is it getting to know your audience and the people that love your books or
That's definitely been really cool. I didn't even really think about that when I wrote the book, to be honest. I'm glad that it is finding the people that love it, and I think that's really, really cool. And I think, just knowing that my book resonates with people is really rewarding, and I really enjoyed that part.
yeah. Yeah, that's really great. I watched you had done it's probably like 2 months ago now, maybe a little longer, but you had done like maybe it wasn't a live, you had recorded it, but you were holding the actual copy of your book, like the hard copy of your book, and you had said how many had sold and how many were going out, and you were talking about how the feeling that you had. And I was like, that is so cool. That has to be a very cool feeling to like.
Yeah, it's surreal, especially because I queried for so long and had so many rejections. It's wild to see it now come full circle, where I'm like holding the book, and it started as an idea in my head in my tiny apartment
Yeah.
2 years
Did
ago.
did you definitely want to go more of like traditional, or did you think if that didn't work, you'd do total?
I never really thought I'd do it total on my own. I just don't know how to do it. I wanted to go traditional, but I think where it landed worked out really well for me, because I think my book is does better in an indie market.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So, sorry, I'm going down here. What would you do now to become a better writer? Do you do any kind of reading or watching, other authors, or like what do you do to hone your
A lot of reading.
a lot of reading?
Yeah, a lot of reading, and I like try to pick up on like, oh, this is the way that they're wording this sounds really good, and I try to like pick up on how they're telling the story, even if like the craft isn't technically correct. Like, how are they telling the story that people like this?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. So, as a romance author, I always like to ask this. So, how do you show love, like your love language, kind of like, because you have
Oh,
to kind of write that in the book. So, how do
yeah.
you do that? What's yours? Do you know?
In real life, mine is quality time.
Yeah.
Um, but that's kind of hard to show in the book.
Yes.
So I kind of try to show it like touches or, memories or senses. That's the easier way to show it because quality time is a little less easy.
Yeah. Did you feel like you struggled with the show versus tell at all when you were writing?
Oh, definitely at the beginning. I had no idea probably what I was doing. That's why it took me 15 drafts to get to this one. Yeah, it's very hard because like you think maybe that at the beginning you think you're like, yeah, I know how to do this. Like I've read a book before. I also experience feelings. um,
Yeah.
but it's definitely like a skill that you have to hone, and there's a lot of like also like especially in fantasy because you're trying to build this world, like not info dumping and overwhelming the reader too much. That was really hard, and I had to cut a lot out of my book that was just me dumping on the reader.
Yeah. Are you going to go back and use some of that knowledge that you like came up with and kind of trickle it through the
Yes.
other books to make it a bigger,
Yes.
more all encompassing? Yeah.
Yeah. The next book's already, so the first book was 85,000 words. This next book is already 125,000 words. So we got about another half a book.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm so excited. I love long books. I just want to live in them. So, what is something unique or quirky about you that maybe most people don't know?
Oh, I really like to go bowling.
Ooh, so do I. That's fun. So, what about it do you like for it?
Well, I was on a bowling team in high school, and I just really liked the atmosphere, and like the team was always like so fun, and like I love eating the greasy food. It just like kind of brings me back to like a good time in my life.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, we definitely know that you would probably win if we went up against you being on a team. Going bowling, but I'm horrible. I always end up going like off to the side or the other way or never where I want it to go. But it's a lot of fun and
Yeah.
lots of laughs. That's for sure. So after this series, do you have any other plans? Like, are you going to stick with fantasy or?
Yeah, I have a few. I have like a draft of another book written that needs to be redone. And then I'd like to do something in like the vampire realm. And maybe more like historical fantasy versus
Mhm.
like pure high fantasy. Yeah, those are my next two projects after this.
Will they be within the same universe or totally new?
Totally new.
Totally new.
Totally, yeah.
So if for my last question, what would be a message you'd want your readers to take away after reading your book?
Um, that you don't have to be perfect to find love. I think that's my biggest message because a lot of times in especially romance books, we have female characters who are totally perfect and not flawed at all, and I think that's unrealistic, and everybody is worthy of love.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm very excited to see more from you and get back with these characters. I love them all, and I'm excited to see what next in the chapters ahead. But thank you so much for joining me today and chatting with me about your books and your characters. And I just wish you all the best success and lots in the future.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad you love the book, and if if I can plug my
Oh,
newsletter,
cool. Yeah.
please sign up for my newsletter. If you do, you get access to chapters before they're released, and when the arcs come out, you'll be the first to know.
Awesome. Well, that's great. So I'll put the link below in the description so that you can do that. And then be sure to follow her on Instagram, and I'll also link that below. Of course, please follow me, like and subscribe below. And then if you have a book bestie that you think would love this book, definitely send this their way, because I'm sure they can add another book to their TBR. I'm sure we're all book dragons looking for our next read. So thank you again, and be sure to tune in next time where we get a look behind the book. And I love you all, and thank you for checking out my channel. Bye-bye for now.